Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns with two people who have been guests of us many times before. Patrick Klinger, who has been not only a guest but a guest host, and Bill Robertson, whose name is legend in hockey and other places, who has been with us innumerable times also, Western Collegiate Hockey Association men's commissioner. And why don't you each give a little bit of background about yourselves and before we talk about this exciting new venture that you're going into right here on Eagan-TV. So Patrick, why don't you?
Thanks, Ollie. Hey, great to be back. Always a pleasure to be here. I own a marketing company called the Brand Enhancement Group. That's been in existence for about 5 years, and we work primarily with companies that use sports and entertainment as marketing platforms, so really corporate partners of sports teams. Prior to that, I spent 14 seasons as the Vice President of Marketing for the Minnesota Twins, and even prior to that, I've spent most of my career in the sports and entertainment realm.
So it's sports going back all the way to college.
Right.
Pretty much, yes. And Bill?
Well, I have a diverse background as well. I've worked in Major League Baseball with the Anaheim Angels, with the NHL, with the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim and the Minnesota Wild, and then the NBA's Minnesota Timberwolves, and then a stint with USA Hockey, handling men's and women's hockey for the Olympics in 2002 and 2006. And I'm excited to be back here again in this great studio.
You have a very unique position because people are saying, oh, this week it happens that the Vikings are going all the way to England to play a game. Your league makes that look like nothing because you have undoubtedly, geographically, the largest league spread in terms of miles of anybody in the world, I think.
Well, it has a unique footprint, and as we've discussed before, we go all from Alaska all the way to Alabama in the WCHA on the men's side, and that presents some positives. It also presents some challenges for the teams and the student athletes who are having to travel and take care of their school work as well. But overall, I think the one thing about it that's unique about it is the fact that the administrations of all these universities understand the travel concerns and how this manages itself, and they want their students to graduate, but they also want their students to get this education where they can go to Alaska or go to Alabama, places you probably wouldn't get to normally playing collegiate sports.
And not only that, but you've got quite a few of your players who are now playing in the NHL.
We do.
The National Hockey League.
Yes, and this year the opening night roster had, I believe, 13 players from the WCHA on NHL rosters, and then this summer the developmental camps for all the NHL teams had 36 WCHA players. We're very proud of that and the rich history of the league, but it continues to flow into the NHL, and that pipeline to professional hockey for many of our players has gone very well.
The logistics of planning games where teams have to travel thousands of miles for a weekend series has got to be very, very challenging.
It is, and we try to develop a plan of attack where when the teams go to Alaska, they try to stay up there for the week, and then they bring a faculty rep who helps them with their studies during that time, and they can take their tests. So the travel isn't going for just one trip and then having to come back from Fairbanks to the U.S., to the continental U.S., and then to Anchorage, and then back and forth. Now the schools in Alaska will travel student aides to help and tutors to help these kids continue their classwork as they're developing.
Well, having taught in colleges and law schools for many years, I'd be happy to be a traveling rep with somebody and get to see all these different locations. Patrick, someplace along the line, either you or Bill, who know each other, 20 years, came up with the idea of a different type of sports show. And that's really what we're announcing here today. It's going to debut here on Eagan-TV on December 1st, a program called Behind the Bar. Who got the idea? Where did it come from? And what are we going to talk about? What are we going to feature?
Yeah, Ellen, Behind the Game is a show about the world of sports, but not what you see on the field or on the court or on the ice. There are so many other parts to putting on a sporting event that the typical fan doesn't see. They tend to focus on the players, and rightly so. But it takes a village to put on a sporting event, and whether it be the general manager of the team, whether it be the marketing people, whether it be the corporate sponsors, there are a lot of different components to a successful sporting event. Bill and I have been in the industry for a long, long time, and we understand that. We thought that this show would be an opportunity to share with the public really what happens behind the scenes, what's going on when the fans' focus is on the ice or on the court.
We're going to go back into the dressing room, so to speak. Not like Donald Trump, but into the nitty-gritty of what puts these things together. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I mean, when Patrick came to me with the idea, and then we talked to you, Alan, the thought of doing a show really about what happens, not with necessarily the game, but everything around it, which surrounds it, and what makes it fascinating for Patrick and I when we go to games is that we're not always watching what happens on the field or on the court or on the ice, but we're looking at all the things that surround the game, the arena itself, and what happens with sponsorship, what happens with public relations, what happens with the community, what happens with game operations. All those things go in, as Patrick stated, into a sporting event, and we want to explore that with the viewers and show them that there is more to sports than just the game itself.
And it's a different world today in terms of that, because most teams travel by plane, and you have to worry about getting the equipment there. What happens if you get the players and you don't get the equipment? Making hotel arrangements. And Patrick, you certainly dealt with these things, as Bill does now, for many years, in terms of supervising the publicity, coverage, guests, etc. So it's got to be really challenging that people don't get the opportunity. It's not that they're not interested. They don't get the opportunity to even consider that part of the operation.
Well, you're absolutely right, Alan. There's so many aspects to a sporting event that really do fly below the radar. But it's very, particularly for those of us who are in the business, it's very compelling. It's very interesting to see, what it takes to pull off an event. Just opening the doors to a Major League Baseball game, for instance. Somebody's got to sell the tickets, right? Somebody's got to sell the corporate sponsorships. You've got people taking the tickets. You've got people scheduling the national anthem and the ceremonial first pitch, and all of those pieces that go into creating a really special event.
Sometimes honoring a star, a former star, or somebody local who has a prestigious opportunity to be honored for something.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and Bill can speak to this as well, but when you're planning a big league sporting event, it doesn't just happen in a day or two. It can take sometimes a year of planning. When I was in baseball, we would start planning the following year's schedule and promotions at least a year in advance. It takes that much coordination. So those are the kind of things that the fan doesn't typically see because they're focused on what's happening, the action on the field. And that's okay, but we want to take them behind the curtain and show them what is really required to pull off a successful event. Even
when it comes down to the mascot. Does the mascot travel with the team? Does the mascot not? In some cases, cheerleaders. Do they travel with the team? Do they not? And things like that. It's really a massive operation that people generally don't think about, so they don't have the concept.
Well, you're totally correct with that, and the games are changing, and the leagues are changing so much, and how much entertainment goes into a sporting event. Just take a look at what's coming up in the Twin Cities area in the state of Minnesota. You have the Super Bowl, which is an extravaganza, which they've been planning for several years. You have the men's Frozen Four coming to St. Paul in early April of this year, and then the following spring you have the NCAA Final Four coming to Minneapolis at US Bank Stadium. So you have all these huge events that take place that have hundreds of people, not only with the leagues but the teams planning for that one particular weekend of events, and it's amazing how it gets done, and this area of the country has done it better than anybody else because we've had the Ryder Cup, we've had the US Opens, we've had so many big time sporting events. Patrick was around when the Twins planned on the Major League Baseball All-Star game here a few years ago that was highly successful, and there's other events. We could sit here for hours talking about the big time events, but I think we want to show the audiences what goes into that and how it gets done and who are key decision makers in all that process.
So that in and of itself is absolutely fascinating to me. And it will be to people who start watching as of December 1st. You're starting off with what, one a month? Give or take, yeah.
Right.
And I am sure that it's something that's going to catch on with people and be of really great interest. You talk about all these events that have been so successful here in Minnesota, and you certainly, Patrick, had your finger in many of them. But it's because the people are nicer here. I don't want to say smarter here, but I'll whisper it. They are great organizers. They are great hosts. They're so hospitable. And now we have facilities that will equal anybody's facilities. Wasn't that way. It wasn't that way when I moved here 20 years ago. Went to a Twins game. I grew up a Yankee fan. Went to a Twins game. There are between 8,000 and 9,000 people in the Metrodome. The Yankees come in like the Cadillac, and then there's the Twins with a payroll maybe 20%, maybe not even 20%. And how could you not become a Twins fan? And we went through some hard times with that. We almost lost the Twins here, but we managed to save them. A bunch of civic-spirited people who got together and really saved the Twins from contraction. So, yes, there's a lot to it. So what can we expect with Behind the Game?
Well, what I think we can expect is a different look at sports that will bring in people who are sometimes involved directly in the game. It could be general managers, it could be heads of marketing, it could be corporate partners of the team. But I think we'll also bring some guests in who are on sort of the periphery of sports as well. Technology is exploding in sports these days, both with what's happening on the field and in the stands. And that's an area that we plan to explore. How is technology changing the way that teams are training, how athletes are getting prepared for games, how fans are interacting with the team? So there's just a plethora of opportunities here, Alan, to look beyond just simply what's happening on the field.
And technology that you bring up is certainly a very big factor. We have 8 teams that made the baseball playoffs. Right now we're in the World Series and it's tied 1-1. But of those 8 teams, since the season ended, you folks just mentioned that 3 managers have already been fired. They bring a team into the playoffs, you would think that perpetuates them. Somebody like Joe Girardi, who has 200 more wins than losses, and I pick up today's paper, and the Yankees said goodbye to him. There's not a lot of sentimentality, I think, anymore in the game as much as being wedded to the technical side of it. And I'm not sure that that's 100% good for the game either.
Well, I would say that there's a couple things to that. In today's sports world, and baseball is really going through a lot of changes, the cybermetrics and the analytic piece of the game has become such a big deal. And I think that's what Patrick is touching on a bit, is that the old school general manager and the old school manager of a team, those days where they're not looking at new ways to position your outfield and infield. Should you be bunting? Should you be looking for walks? What are the percentages when a right-handed batter is against a right-handed pitcher? All those things are becoming such a big
And how many
influence.
times has he faced that pitcher previously, and what's his percentage with that pitcher? And we saw that in the Houston Dodger game the other day,
Yes.
where the manager really followed the analytics with a pitcher who was a great pitcher but removed in the 4th inning, basically on stats, and ultimately that cost the game to the Dodgers.
Well, it probably did, and I would say another thing you're seeing in baseball is the new wave of the general managers are all coming from backgrounds where they've gone to Ivy League schools, or they've gone getting their doctorates and their master's degrees, and that wasn't the way baseball was several years ago. It's changing, and all these things happen in the game, and the staffs they're hiring now behind the scenes to look up all these analytics and to get all these stats and charts together is amazing, and that's something I hope we're going to be able to explore as time goes on.
Now, do you have a guest lined up for your debut on December 1?
We're keeping that guest under wraps right now.
Secret.
Secret.
Surprise.
Secret, yes.
And yeah, I mean, I obviously, I'm not from the old school. I'm from the old school of tobacco chewing managers and going by their gut and their instincts, and that's just gone away. Maybe it was Moneyball that changed it, which brought what happened, I guess it was in L.A., into focus now, and every team seems to be relying, as you said, so much more on the technical side of it.
I would agree 100%. Moneyball was what I think people know in sports, but it's translated into other sports, Alan, into the NBA now and the NFL for sure. Technology, when you have video on the sidelines that people can look at instead of just charts and graphs anymore, it's so different. And then even in hockey, in college hockey, you can have video on the bench to be able to look at in college and professional, so a player can see what they missed on the ice within seconds after their shift is over.
And we see it in football all the time, where they shoot down pictures, and a quarterback who just threw an interception gets a chance to look and see what he or she did wrong. Not that there are a lot of female quarterbacks, but there are some really good female teams. We have some right here in Minnesota. Our women's volleyball team is one of the best in the country.
Yes.
And that's another thing that has to be coordinated. Travel for all these different teams. A university, a college may have 6 different teams. A university may have a dozen. And somebody has got to be there to do that.
Well, there's no question about it. And baseball is probably the most complex because they have so many games and such an extensive travel schedule. So there is a traveling secretary, for instance, in Major League Baseball, whose responsibility is to make sure that there's a plane waiting on the tarmac to take the team to where they need to go, that there are buses waiting when they arrive, that the hotel is set and ready for them, and there's a bus the next day from the hotel to get them to the ballpark and back. And the coordination that's required is really pretty remarkable. And you can ill afford to miss a flight or miss a bus, or there's going to be challenges. So.
And sometimes weather intervenes, which really throws a wrench into the whole operation.
And no question about it. That's one of those X factors that exist. But it's all yet another example of the tremendous number of pieces that are involved in putting on an event, and all the elements behind the scenes that go on prior to every sporting event to make it successful.
I don't know of another program, another TV show that is going to do or attempt to do what you are going to do. And I think that there's a uniqueness there. Usually when we go off screen at halftime or something like that, it's former athletes trying to pretend that they're still athletes by throwing the football or by swinging a bat. And you're actually going to bring the people who make these games go and bring them here to Eagan-TV, where we can talk about them, where they can tell us what they do. And it's just fascinating to me. So.
Well, we're looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun, and without your encouragement and assistance, this would not have happened. So thank you, Alan.
It's all yours. I'm just a pretty face in front of the camera today, but I mean, other than that, it's going to be right in your lap, and we're excited about it.
Good.
We really are.
As are we.
The Super Bowl has created such a stir here for 2 years, and you never really appreciate the magnitude of what that means until you see the grants that are going out to various cities to enhance facilities and things like that, and the preparation, and the fact that a strip joint was included among the featured places to attend until they discovered it in it yesterday. Brochures, hotels, arrangements, transportation, and that's just one game. Halftime's got to be one of the biggest things. People unveiling advertising. That's probably the biggest day in the year for advertisers who pay an unbelievable amount of money for 30 seconds to unveil their new ads.
But you go back even further, the proposals that were put together to say we want to host a Super Bowl in the Twin Cities in the upper Midwest region, the kind of time and energy that was put in place by all sorts of different entities coming together as one is amazing in itself, just to understand that piece, Alan. And that's what makes this sports world so fascinating. There's so many moving pieces and parts, and we're excited to get going and explore all these different variables that create the great area of sports.
It's interesting because they're both former athletes and they are so calm and laid back. I am not, but I'm the one who I hope sounds excited because I am. And athlete, I still remember my double in high school. That was it. So,
Well, you've got one more double than I had in high school then.
well, it was high school playing against third graders. I was lucky. So, other than that, and the surprise guest, who we really are looking forward to, and actually we only have 2 minutes left. Mary just told me we only have 2 minutes left. So, give us each a closing argument about Behind the Game. Let's start with you, Bill.
Well, I don't know if I call it an argument, but from a lawyer perspective, I mean, the business of sports and what happens other than the game is so incredibly remarkable from every facet. And I think what we're trying to do here is to show the audience and people that are interested in this that there is more to putting on a game than just having the players show up and be on the field or the court or the ice. We want to show all the things that go around that, and I can't wait to get started on December 1st. It'll be a lot of fun.
Patrick?
You know, Jack Morris was a great pitcher for the Twins, one of the greatest pitchers in baseball in the 1980s. And when Jack retired from the game, he was the keynote speaker at a party for part-time staff for the Twins. And there were probably 600 or 700 people there. And Jack stood in front of those people and he said, you know, when I was a pitcher, I didn't notice any of you. I didn't care about what you did. I wanted to get to the mound. I wanted to win, and I wanted to go home at the end of the day. He said, now that I'm out of the game, and I'm one of you, I understand now what you do and how hard you work and what's required to put on a baseball game. And I think that's one of the things that we want to share with the audience.
And so they will. Bill Robertson, Patrick Klinger, the name of the new program, debuting here, world debut, Behind the Game, as of December 1st. And thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Great to be here, Alan. Thank you.